Since 1983, FAME has helped business and education work for Maine. Contact the authority, the Finance Authority of Maine. You're watching Mainebiz Sunday, Maine's business news source.
Welcome back. I'm Alan Hinsey. With us today we have Laurie Lachance, President of the Maine Development Foundation, Dana Connors, President of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and Yellow Breen, Senior Vice President with Bangor Savings Bank. We're discussing the recommendations in the MDF report, Maine's Investment Imperative 2, Unleashing the Potential. Good first segment. I do want to start off with one of the things I loved about this and what you did was it wasn't just a bunch of policy folks sitting around in the background kind of making up their mind. You did a survey, and it was over 1,000 businesses that really got a good kind of cross-section of what businesses are thinking, and that was what was driving the recommendation. And they ranked their priorities 1 through 19 in terms of what they want the next governor to really focus on. So before we get into all of that, I guess I wanted to ask Laurie, I'm going to start with you. Did they get it right? Did businesses, do they know what they're talking about out there?
By definition, they got it
you
right.
Because they're watching this show.
We asked several thousand businesses because we partnered with many the regional chambers of commerce and associations, and they sent it out to their membership, and we got an overwhelming response. And the degree of agreement was amazing.
Especially on
very clear
those
priorities.
top 4 or 5 that were really, you could see there was clearly a consensus there. I know you had some issues about kind of the workforce issues, those things. Do you think, what do you think the business attitude about that was?
Yeah, there were a number of questions on the survey, and I think this is why polling is an art, not a science to some degree. But it was interesting that the top 2 things when talked about what supports economic growth in Maine, one was a skilled workforce and one was quality of life. You do see those reflected in some of the more detailed answers. The workforce one, interestingly, not reflected quite as much in their specific top priorities. I'm not sure why that is. It could be that individual businesses are taking it upon themselves to seek out workers, build partnerships with colleges, and adult training programs, and so they don't necessarily view it as a system issue. I'm not sure, but it's important not to lose sight of the totality of the survey and look at some of the responses together.
I do want to talk about, the discussion now is going to be about the top 3 or 4 that businesses really identified that they want to make sure that next governor deals with, they focus on. Number 1 was cost of health care. It was the strongest negative impact per the business survey. More than 85% of the businesses responded saw it as a negative impact on their business and the number 1 priority for the next governor. I know you've thought about this a lot. Why is that, and how do we compare with other states as far as that goes?
Oh, compared to other states, we're significantly higher. One way to measure that is just the percentage that healthcare spending cost relates to your gross state product. In Maine, it's almost 20%, 19.3. And the national average, it's more like 13.3. That in itself gives you a pretty clear picture of its impact. But you really need to boil it down because, in truth, it's how we use it and how much we use of it that really starts to tell you the story of how you're going to get your arms around this equation. So there's a federal health program we're still trying to figure out. It'll take us 10 years. I don't mean that in a critical, condemning way. It's just the way it's structured.
Some of the things don't kick in for 6 years.
Exactly. But at the same time, the governor, the new governor, has a tremendous influence on setting the stage when it comes to trying to keep our costs as a state below the national average. And rates of increase is focused on wellness. Those are things that are within our grasp. I argue all the time that wellness is to health care what safety is to workers' comp. And to me, it's the essence.
And you've seen the success with that in terms of workers' comp.
Absolutely.
All right. How much is that going to cost us? Is there a price tag on that recommendation? Even the wellness one?
Well, the price tag...
And who pays?
We're paying it right now.
Okay, it's just a shift then.
It's actually a savings because when you can really look at wellness for its return, we're saving every day we do something about it. That's not a cost factor. That's a savings.
All right. Okay. Let's go on to the next one because it was also rated very high. 78% of the respondents see energy cost to their business as it was the second most important issue for them for the next governor. Yellow, jump in on that one and talk about that and just why is that one so important and does it affect certain industry sectors more than others?
Well, clearly, I mean, our business is not particularly energy intensive in banking, but when you're talking about manufacturing processes, fabrication, it's a huge issue, and you know, even for many other industries in Maine, it's an enormous issue. And I think energy costs, like healthcare, like the cost of living, we're not always going to force these down to where we're a low-cost state in Maine, but we have to be competitive And our challenge is we're competing with lower cost states and nations in some of our traditional natural resource industries, and so we have to get down within striking range. And yet we're competing with kind of more modern economies in the rest of the Northeast on what we do. So we're fighting a two-front war, and we have to be smart and focused and hold these costs down, even if they're a little higher than some other parts of the world. They got to be within reason.
So what does business want the next governor to do? What do you guys want the next governor to do? What's your recommendation? How do we do that?
It's a short and a long-term perspective. In the short term, we can't solve all these issues immediately, but we can make sure we're investing wherever possible in weatherization, conservation, in this new smart grid technology so we can send the appropriate signals, that we could negotiate contracts with our Canadian neighbors who have much lower priced electricity, that we could put in place an LNG facility that would immediately lower costs in Maine. Those are things that can be done in the short term. In the long term, we've got to set the stage for a diverse mix of on and offshore wind, biofuels and tidal, and all those variety.
But that investing word, you said we need to invest in it. Can we invest and deal with a $1 billion deficit at the same time?
We have to. I mean, right now, are we going to pay through welfare for oil subsidy, heating subsidies for folks, or are we going to invest in weatherization that lowers their energy usage?
Go ahead.
Also, when you listen to the recommendations that have been just expressed by Laurie that you find in this report, investing in efficiency is a return more than a cost. When you look at building out your portfolio and not demanding the choice that the state's going to make. We've done that in the past and we've lived to suffer from it. We're saying private sector is willing to invest in those energy sources. That's not the state investing as much as setting a policy, creating a direction. The private sector will invest. Market will make the choice for that. I don't think this is so much about government. This is about leadership, setting a policy, creating a course, knowing where we're going. The private sector will do the investment. That's precisely what this report attempts to do. Well,
one quick question because we're running out of time. But in regards to that, the role of government then is
create the environment
and get out of the way.
Get out.
Is it? I know you can't say that out loud exactly, but you got it in terms of and the regulatory issue. That's something we're going to talk about in the afterthought segment. It clearly was ranked number 3 by businesses. So, what are your thoughts on that? Is that one of the most significant things government can do? Is improve its regulatory?
Yeah, well,
presence?
I agree with Dana. I mean, 8 out of $10 that we invest in many of these things we're talking about are going to come from the private sector. It's removing some of the cost drivers that deter that. It's removing some of the inconsistency and barriers that deter that. And when it comes to regulation, as I think people have said repeatedly, it's not a free-for-all. It's not deregulation, but it's regulation that's sensible, consistent, fairly applied, predictable. And so people have a process that they can comply with in a time frame and at a price they can afford.
It's that predictability thing with business again.
Amen.
Okay, I got it. We're going to wrap this segment here. We're going to keep you around for our afterthoughts because you know what? We didn't get to talk about the fourth most important thing for businesses, taxes. So people are going to want to see what you have to say about that. So stick around. You can download a copy of Maine's Investment Imperative 2, Unleashing the Potential, at the mdf.org. My discussion with Laurie Lachance, Dana Connors, and Yellow Breen will continue in our exclusive Afterthought segment seen only on the web. Just go to mainebiz.biz and click on the Mainebiz Sunday link. We'll be right back with some final thoughts.
Mainebiz Sunday is made possible in part by funding provided by the Finance Authority of Maine.